It's always a pleasure to welcome back to the program one of the brightest lights in the United States House. And I say that because when we see him in one of those documentaries about America, he's usually the smartest guy, and he ends up getting the most face time. He's Thaddeus McCotter, member of Congress from the Michigan 11th District. How you doing, Congressman?
Hey, Lars. Thanks for the kind words. It's hard for a face like mine to get any time.
Oh, no. When they hear what's coming out of your mouth, they understand that this is the smart guy you got to get on. We were just giving your state props and kudos for cutting the amount of unemployment they offer from 26 weeks to 20. I think that's a brilliant move.
Well, Michigan knows it has to reinvent itself. Like many in the country, especially in California or elsewhere, we know that we've hit a nadir in terms of our economic growth, and we have to get back to allowing the entrepreneurs and the people of the state of Michigan to grow this economy and put us back on a solid footing.
Hey, Congressman, on another matter, the president's going to speak to the country tonight. We don't know what he's going to say exactly. He's going to make the case for the war in Libya and I guess try to explain why we won't be doing the same thing for other similarly situated Middle East countries, like, say, Syria, for example. But did the president violate the Constitution by doing what he did the way he did?
No, I agree with Mark Levin and others that he did not, and that he has to come to us. As you know, we still control the power of the purse. We control the ability through the War Powers Act to have clarification brought to this or have it brought to termination. What the president has to do is stop being such a lawyer and start being more of a leader. When you have the administration's policy being the ouster of Gaddafi, and yet you've set up a military operation in conjunction with allies that claims to be only setting up a no-fly zone. The problem is that within that no-fly zone, Lars, you've seen them stray into no-drive zones and then trying to dictate the outcome on the ground. That is certainly not what has been put forward to the Congress. It is certainly not what would be in the best interest, I think, of the country. And so I think that the final analysis, the president has to clarify the mission, keep it narrowly circumscribed, and give us an operational sense of what constitutes the fulfillment of the mission.
Well, in fact, I wonder about that because he was saying days, not weeks, and yet now the Pentagon is talking more in terms of months. So is the president going to end up already contradicting his earlier comments?
Well, I think that that's something that the president's going to tell us one way or the other. And as you point out, how do you differentiate Gaddafi's ouster from the ouster of people like Assad or Ahmadinejad? Places where we can be using peaceful means with the opposition to try to get rid of those despots. Those seem to me to be very clear places where a deposition of the regime through the peaceful implosion beneath its people's aspirations for liberty is of the utmost urgency for the United States. And so I would hope that not only is there differentiation, I would like to see him talk about the implementation of ways that we can help uprisings that we know in Syria and Iran are looking for assistance for validation to try to get them to fruition themselves.
Well, you mentioned Iran. Do you get any sense that this president has any interest in helping out what's going on the ground in Iran? Because he certainly didn't use the bully pulpit back when the kids first hit the streets.
Right. It's hard to tell what the motivations are. We know that was a period where he was talking about constructively engaging these regimes, which I think could be like constructively engaging a cobra with an embrace. And I think that he has to start to realize that these nations, when they say death to America, and Syria and Iran are locked in a Molotov-Ribbentrop pact against us for the 21st century, is that these are direct strategic threats to the United States. And when their own people, like the former Soviet Union, are trying to get rid of this regime, we should be assisting them in ways that those individuals on the ground, the Iranians and the Syrians involved in trying to depose these regimes, believe we can be helpful.
Are we sure that this isn't going to be replaced by just another despotic regime or one that's perhaps even worse, one that's actively involved in terrorism against us in Europe?
No, it's a very muddy situation in Libya. When you have a much more clear-cut situation in Syria and in Iran especially, when they've already had a revolution stolen from them, and the radical regime of Khomeini is followed by Khamenei and Ahmadinejad, you know that they want freedom. You know that they've endured the yoke of tyranny. That's why it's so important to me. The success of the Green Revolution in Iran will help set the tone for other revolutions, which are naturally different because every country is different. But at least we give a greater chance for those revolutions to see people come forward that want liberty and want limited government over their lives as opposed to just replacing a despot with a dictatorship.
Talking to Congressman Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan 11th District. Look, Levin's a friend of mine. He's certainly a much better constitutional scholar than I am. He's got much better credentials. But here's the part I don't understand. the Congress says, the Constitution says the Congress has the power to make war, to declare war. In this case, I understand the purpose of the War Powers Act, or at least I thought I did, was to allow a president to move quickly when the country is actually at risk. But in this case, there's no case that that our country was being attacked or was about to be attacked. And so in that case, don't you have to do what President Bush did, which is go to the Congress and say, give me authority to use force? This guy didn't do any of that. How can that fit within the framework of the Constitution?
Well, within the framework of the Constitution, as you know, Lars, they did not want 435 members of the House or 100 members of the Senate each determining what constitutes an imminent threat. They wanted it reviewed after the president would address it.
Right, but there is no imminent threat here.
Truman in Korea, we've seen that, unfortunately, in some cases, with Lyndon Johnson in Vietnam and elsewhere. But the goal would be, to me, to have the War Powers Act, which it is, to allow the president to act and then have the Congress determine whether or not it constitutes a necessary action of the president. Now, he may be in error as to what constituted a risk according to the determination of the Congress under the War Powers Act, but it would not be something that would be unconstitutional if the Congress decides that it's not going to allow it to proceed.
But that means that the Congress would have to determine that in this case the United States was at risk because of what was going on in Libya?
You could determine, that's the point of allowing the War Powers Act to kick in after the president has acted rather than before, because if the Congress delays or does not come up with a unanimous conclusion as to what constitutes an imminent risk, then the president's actions would have been circumscribed before it could have gone forward. So I think that it's the question of having it after the fact, which is as the war powers envisioned, which is going to happen and is happening now. Now, in terms of what constitutes risk, the president could say that the risk to the United States would be having the Gaddafi regime then export, stay ensconced, slaughter its own citizens, set the precedent that other uprisings throughout the Middle East and North Africa could be slaughtered from the skies because Gaddafi got away with it, and then the exportation of terror would constitute a terrible result for the United States. So you can see people define risk differently. But at this point, it will be defined. The president's he has followed the War Powers Act to the president, sent letters to the president pro tem of the Senate, the Speaker. Congress will now deliberate whether this operation should continue under the War Powers Act or not.
Good luck on getting that budget together, too, because I'd love to see the Republicans actually push them to have a budget on time by October 1 of this year, since the Democrats thoroughly missed the mark last year. Congressman, thanks. It's always a pleasure to have you on. You do a great job for the people of Michigan.
Thanks, Lars.